In an industrial building, so an architect's fees for an industrial building might be 1 to 3% of the cost of construction. Whereas on a custom high-end residential, it's 15 to 25% of the cost of construction. Yep. And I'm telling
Wow.
you have to work your fanny off to be profitable, even when pulling in those fees, because it is so much work.
Have you ever wondered how the spaces we live and work in come to life? It's not just about the brick and mortar, it's about the vision, the creativity, and the meticulous coordination. But how do you build a business around such a creative process? Well, my name is Nicholas Haluski, and welcome to another episode of Nikonomics. This is the show for entrepreneurs and wantrepreneurs curious to learn how other businesses work. Over the past 5 years, my companies have generated over $100 million in revenue and created millions of dollars in shareholder value. And on this show, I let my curiosity drive as I interview successful entrepreneurs, asking them to walk me through exactly how their businesses operate. So whether you're an experienced business owner or just starting out, Nikonomics is your place to learn. And on today's episode, I sit down with Marilyn Modinger, a seasoned architect who walked me through her journey from a 6-year-old obsessed with redrawing floor plans to a business owner and consultant. Marilyn doesn't just design spaces. She builds relationships, solves problems, and she brings a unique approach to every project she touches. And in this episode, you'll not only learn about the business of building architecture or the role of an architect, you'll also learn how Marilyn thinks about scaling a business in a highly personal, highly regulated industry. And what I'm the most curious about is, as her business grows, how is Marilyn managing to stay hands-on with her projects while also maintaining the trust of every client she works with? Let's find out together. Okay, guys, we're going to get back to the show in just 1 second. But first, a message from a sponsor who is me. Oh, it's me because I'm doing the show for free. Listen, I want to give you $100. All you have to do is this. Go to Apple or Spotify. Give me 5 stars. Write a review. Screenshot that review. Send it to me, nick@cofounders.com, and you will be entered to win a $100 Amazon gift card. Every 4 episodes, I am going to choose a winner at random, and I'm going to do this 5 times. $500 for 5 stars. I just made that up, and it's what I'm calling it. Please go to Apple or Spotify, leave a review, screenshot it, send it to me, nick@cofounders.com, and you'll be entered to win a $100 Amazon gift card. All right, let's get back to the show. All right, Marilyn, welcome to Nikonomics. Stoked to have you.
It's great to be here, Nick.
Let's just jump into it. Tell me what you do and how you make money.
So I'm an architect, which means that I provide architectural services. I also consult, and I own and operate real estate, and I have a newsletter.
Okay. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about first your background. How did you get into this space? As I've followed you and looked at things that you've done, you majored in something totally different in college. You've worked as a general contractor. You've been an architect. You now do consulting and newsletters. How did you get into this space in the first place?
Well, I did major in architecture. I just double majored in architecture and military history. Fun fact.
Are you kidding me?
No.
That is a really cool fun fact. All right.
Yeah. I actually got into architecture and all of these things when I was like 6 years old. I used to draw houses. I used to my mom would buy plan books for me at the grocery store, and then I would white out all the walls and redraw them where I wanted them. And then at some point, someone was like, so that's a job. There's a school you can go to. And so I went to architecture school. When I graduated from architecture school with my undergrad degree, I went directly into construction. So I started in the field as a laborer.
Cool.
And worked my way up at a general contracting company as an estimator and a project manager. So I didn't stay a laborer for long. I think they realized my highest and best use was probably not that. But it was a great experience and really helped me be a better estimator and project manager.
And where was that?
That was Charlottesville, Virginia.
Charlottesville, Virginia. Okay. If you graduated with a degree in architecture, why did you decide I'm going to go start being a laborer?
Well, I really wanted to know how buildings go together, and I wanted to know that on the ground. And there's only one way to do that. You can't read a book. You can't watch, YouTube. Was it a thing then? I don't know. You got to go do it. And the things I learned, they would give me a broom and I'd sweep the job site, and I would just sweep really close to like where the plumber was talking with his assistant. And then I would learn like the issues they were trying to solve as plumbers. And I'd
Yeah.
hear like the plumber arguing with the HVAC guy, and I'd be like, oh, mental note, like, don't do that, or whatever in the design. Or I'd hear what they were complaining about with architects or whatever their issues were. I just kept my ears open and listened to everything.
How long did it take before you went back to school?
It was about 4 years.
And this is a really dumb question, so please judge me as much as you want. Like, I know, so CPAs have to take an exam. Lawyers obviously go to law school, they have to sit for the bar. Architecture is a professional service, but I don't quite understand, what are the qualifications to be an architect?
I'm so glad you asked. So you have to have a professional degree. So there's several different versions. There's a 5-year undergrad you can get, which is kind of rare, or you have to get your master's. If you have an undergrad degree in architecture and you go for your master's, it's 2 to 3 years. So the minimum amount of school is 5, but most people it's 7 or 6 or 7, maybe even 8 years of school. At that point, at least when I did it, it's a little bit different now. So some of these phases can overlap, but there's an internship experience, which they call something different now, and I don't know. But basically you have to work. It was like 5,500 hours that I had to work in a supervised environment under 15 different categories. So I had to work 1,000 hours learning about this. And this is apprenticing. So this is working at an architecture firm and having a licensed architect sign off that I had done that 1,000 hours in that category. So there's everything from structural to construction stuff to business things to design to all of that. Once you're done with that, you have 7, at least when I did it, now I think it's 7 exams.
Before the exams, you said 1,000 hours in how many categories?
It's 5,500 hours total when I did it.
2.5 years.
Yeah, 2.5, 3 years.
3 years of like full-time work.
Yep.
Okay. So then you pass that and then you sit for some exams?
Yes. Now I think you can be doing and taking the exams at the same time. So people do that differently. But yeah, so there's 6 or 7 exams, and those exams are in different areas of expertise. So again, structures, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, site planning, ethics, and business stuff, design, of course. And then on any exam at any time, they can ask you architecture history questions at any time.
Really?
Yes.
Architecture history?
Yeah. So you have to understand.
Like what? Like, hey, the Parthenon in Rome was built with this material.
Well, the Parthenon's actually in Greece. The Pantheon is in Rome. So there you go.
Good. I was testing you. I said, I'm such an idiot. Gosh dang it.
I mean, I couldn't let it slide, you know.
My job is to make you look good, and I softballed right there, and it was perfect. You hit it out of the park.
Thank you.
I watched something recently on the way that they designed that and how Roman concrete is supposedly very, very, very strong. And one of the things that they found was that, I'm going to totally butcher this, and you're going to correct me because you know how it works. One of the things that they found is that over time, as water came in, and it broke down the calcium in the concrete, but it reconfigured or recalcified in a way that actually made it stronger. And it was something that we didn't even know, which is why that building has been able to stand for thousands of years. And they figured that out, and they just luck into that. Yeah,
it's pretty amazing. The Romans are pretty smart engineers, so I feel like they probably knew a lot of that stuff, but it's unreinforced, which is really key. So when we build concrete now, we put rebar in it, which is steel, which takes on the tensile forces. Concrete works in compression. So it's really pretty amazing, that size of dome, and it's not very thick either. And it's got an oculus at the center. It's like,
I know.
It's amazing.
Have you ever been?
I have, yes, several times.
My wife and I went, and that was probably my favorite. I knew what it was, but it's something to see a picture of it, and then another thing to actually be there.
100%.
Standing in the sunlight, kind of shining it. I want to tell you a funny story.
Okay.
My father is an immigrant. He grew up in Brazil. He's technically Ukrainian. And growing up, he wanted to always work with his hands. Mm. And I love you, Dad. He'll never listen to this. He's just not very good with his hands. Our house was like always in a state of construction. And I can just hear him yelling at me. He's like, Nikolai, please hand me a hammer. Go move, hold the ladder for me. And he's like doing something crazy up top. But he was a draftsman. And I just remember my parents getting into a fight because apparently he had put like architect on his business card, and the state of California sent him a letter that was like, you can't, Anatole, you can't say you're an architect. And my mom was like, what are you doing? Why would you say you're an architect?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my brief story of funny immigrants. So you went through the process, you became an architect. How long did you work strictly as an architect? Because you own real estate, you've worked as a general contractor. Like, how did those pieces fit into your story?
So when I graduated from grad school, it was during the recession. So I graduated in 2010. Basically, there was nothing happening. I got a job offer in Boston. I had never been to Boston, so I was like, sure, let's go. And I took a job with an architecture firm there, and that's where I got all my multifamily experience and worked with a lot of developers. And it was really, really good. That firm was really good at understanding the needs of developers and making really great multifamily projects. So that's where that was like boot camp. And I was not licensed at that point. I was still what they used to call an intern architect. I think it's different what they call it now, architect in training or something. So I was not licensed yet, but I was able to work on these projects. And so I did that for a couple of years. And then I actually went into higher ed. I was an administrator at a design school in Boston.
Oh, cool.
Yep. And ran all of the design build and community engagement projects. That's where I learned a lot about writing contracts. Besides the contractor part, this was like also the other part of that. Like, how do you get a bunch of people to decide what a project is and agree to it? And I worked with 80 different nonprofits to set groups of students up with them to do these projects. So that was an organizational thing. And then I started my own company in 2013.
Okay. So this is the part, obviously, I'm probably most curious about. What was the trigger? What was the moment where you were like, I'm done with higher ed because all these students just kill me, and that you said, I'm going to start my own company?
It was completely by accident. So it was not a grand plan. So what happened was I was tired of higher ed, but I wasn't tired of the students. I love the students and I love teaching. And I ended up teaching for about 10 years after that as an adjunct. So I love that part. But what I wasn't so excited about was the massive meetings and the like talking all the time. And I was just like, I just want to do stuff. Like I'm just not cut out for all these meetings. Like I want to do stuff. So I left that and I said, I have 3 more exams to take before I'm licensed. And I don't have a plan for what to do, but I know I've got about 6 weeks of pay and vacation and savings and whatever. I'm going to make it through Christmas. I'm going to take the rest of these exams and then I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do. I'll just go get a job in another architecture office. Well, I passed my exams and then funny things started happening. People were like, oh, we heard you're available. Do you want to pinch hit on this project? So I started to help out on other stuff, people at other firms that I knew. And
doing what specifically?
Architecture. So
architecture.
Yep. Yeah. Someone says, hey, we just got a big project in the door. This happens a lot in architecture. A firm might get a big job in the door. They don't want to hire someone permanent. They just need a couple people to fill in the ranks. So,
and forgive my ignorance, even though you hadn't taken those 3 tests, because you were working under the supervision of a licensed architect, your work was fine because essentially you're being reviewed by them.
That's right. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And then I was licensed after I think it was February of 2014 is when I think that's when all the paperwork came through. So then I realized that and then people said, well, why don't you just take on this project yourself? We don't have time at our firm or we don't want to, and then I was talking to people and networking and realizing that I was saying, I'm an architect. I can do this. And people were like, well, we'll just hire you to be our architect. And I said, oh, okay. I should probably have like insurance or something. So and like maybe an LLC, I guess. So I filed my LLC paperwork on April 15th, 2014. And I don't know, everyone in the government was busy and looking the other way because the paperwork went straight through. And that was it. So I was in business and I got myself a business card and I was an architect with my own practice.
Help me understand, like tactically for architecture. So I mentioned before, my dad was a draftsman. I just know that's a word. I don't really know what that means. What does the architect do? What are like non-architecture requirements? I don't even know what question I'm asking. I hope it makes sense what I'm trying to say.
Well, I'll give an answer and you can tell me if my answer makes sense as to what you're talking about. So at an architecture firm, there's a variety of different people who work there to execute a project. So at the top is the architect. That's the person. We actually have a physical stamp, a rubber stamp that has our name and it has our, state. It's by state and it has our number, and we stamp the drawings like physically, not so much like digital. But what that stamp means is I'm an architect. I am endowed by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts or Pennsylvania or Maine, that's where I am, licensed professional, to take on the liability on behalf of my clients. And I attest that these are, to the best of my professional ability, properly done. Now, that doesn't mean that I physically have drawn everything that's in that drawing set. In the early days, it did. I drew everything. I was the intern, I was the draftsman, I was the designer, I was everything. When you start to build out your team, you start to fill in those roles with different people. So a draftsman would be someone who might have a 2-year degree or no degree, they just have experience, and they would be drafting. So they would be, and in the old days, at drafting tables, literally making all the drawings. Now it's all digital. So you can either be working in 2D or 3D, and there's all these different programs that you would work in. And the whole team is working on the drawing set all together. So there's a hierarchy, and depending on how large the firm is, you have all sorts of, there's architect, there's project architect, there's design architect, there's all these different sort of levels. But most architecture firms in the United States, like 70% of them, are between 1 and 5 people. They're tiny.
Interesting. Tiny.
Yep. So those types of firms, if it's a 5-person firm, might have one stamping architect at the top, and then a couple of maybe non-licensed people who are really advanced. Like that's what I have, is non-licensed people who are exceptionally advanced and really, really good. And they work directly under me and might sort of be manning a project and running the project, but I have to be keeping an eye on everything as a stamping professional.
It's really, really interesting to hear you describe it, because my background is healthcare. So home health, hospice, home care in particular. It sounds a lot like a physician practice.
Yep. Yeah.
Where you have like the supervising. Yeah, exactly. You have the supervising physician. They may have a nurse practitioner or a physician assistant. They may write prescriptions, or they may actually see a lot of the patients. They may even have nurses who come in and take blood pressure, to do blood work. But ultimately, the physician signs off on all the work that they're doing. So describe to me what a project is. And I'll give you an example. I own an RV park in Waco, Texas that I bought. And we got a letter from the city recently that was like, hey, surprise, we know you just bought this park, but here are all the things that were out of compliance. You have to build, what was it called? A bathroom. You have to, anyways, come to code with all of these different things. And the first question I had is like, okay, who do we take this to? So that's going to be my first question to you. So you would take it to just an architect?
Yeah. So basically what it sounds like is a letter. And by the way, I get these kind of calls all the time. Someone saying, I don't know who to go to. What do I do? They're talking about buildings and code, and I don't know what to do. So an architect is also in the world, in the building industry, is also very much like a general contractor in that we are sort of conductors of the orchestra, right? So I'm conducting the design team orchestra. So that means that I can play a civil engineering role, but I'm not a civil engineer, right? Like I am not the first violin. I can scratch my way through on the violin, but I'm not the expert. So there's engineers. In your case, I would read your letter and I would say, what of these things are things that I can take care of as an architect? So bathroom, this, building related things, zoning related things. And then I might say, they've got a couple things on here about your utilities. So we need to bring in a civil engineer. I would bring that in under me potentially, and I would marshal them. And so I'd say, we need a civil engineer. And they're also talking about this drainage thing. So we might need a civil engineer who specializes in exterior drainage. And I would go into my network and say, all right, I'm thinking of this engineer. Let me put this person, let me pull this person. And this is your team who can get this done.
So you're quarterbacking.
Yep.
The whole process.
Yep.
I always thought it was like the general contractor. Okay, I'll reach out to a general contractor and they'll quarterback it. Am I just an idiot, or is that a common misconception?
That's a very common misconception. The general contractor is a quarterback also. So there's 2 quarterbacks on your team who have 2 teams working under them. And when you take the field, you as owner take the field, you have 2 quarterbacks and 2 teams, but they're both on the same team. Like, it's kind of weird.
Would you be the one who's like, hey, Nick, this is the general contractor I would recommend? Or would it be like, oh, I don't do the general contracting stuff. You're going to have to figure out who you're going to find to actually execute the work?
So the way that it works is if you've come to me first and you haven't talked to any GCs, I would say in my network, these are the GCs that I think would be a good fit for you. Also, happy to work with whoever you're bringing to the table.
And it probably works the other way too, right? Like if I went to the GC first, they're like, oh, here are the architects that I work with. Oh, okay.
So when you sign agreements, the contractual relationships are you are at the top and you sign one contract with the architect and one contract with the general contractor. And then below that are all the subcontracts, right? So the general contractor has the plumber, the HVAC guy, the framer. I have the engineer, the interior designer, the whatever. I have all those people, the zoning expert, whatever. The general contractor and the architect do not have a contract together, but they have a contractual relationship based on sort of case law and based on the contracts that are signed.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. So like, yes, that's the RV park, but you could also do, if you're remodeling your house or whatever, let's say you go through the process and you do the plans. I'm assuming you also work with the city, or at least liaison with the city to get them approved and incorporate feedback, et cetera. Once those are approved, they're just handed to the general contractor, and the general contractor is like, cool, thanks for passing the baton. And like, that's the end of your relationship with the general contractor as architect?
Nope. So
no.
Generally, there's feathering in of the contractor much earlier than that. So I prefer to have the contractor on board early to give early bids. So when I run my processes, I would say to you, hey, you know what? Let's knock out a schematic design here, like a basic sort of setup. And then let's go to 3 general contractors and let's get a ballpark estimate about what we've got here. Before I go all the way down the road with figuring everything out, let's make sure, let's get some ballparks. That ballpark, so we have a whole process for that. And because I used to be a contractor and an estimator and whatever, I'm able to give them the information they need. I'm holding the owner back a lot. Like, they don't care about the color of the tile in the bathroom at all. They just need to know, like, the basic of what's going on. So I'm holding them back. We put together a big bid package and we get 3 bids. Those are ballpark bids, right? Like, where are we in the ballpark? Then we say, okay, now that we know, and it's a chance for us to meet the contractors and for you to say, you know what, I really like contractor A and had a good price, let's work with him. So we would get under contract with him or her under what's called pre-construction services. So you might pay them a couple grand to help advise the team so that I'm not drawing something. I can call the contractor and say, hey, dude, you're on the team. I'm getting ready to draw this. What do you think about the way to do this? And vice versa, right? So then the team assembles early. Once the drawings are completed and ready to go to the city for application for permit, the contractor does take the drawings at that point and they apply for the permit. Once they have the permit, then the contractor does take on a much bigger role because now it's time to build. But the architect goes into a new role, which is called contract administration, which is where we are watching the project through the end of the project. So let's say it's a renovation of your home and the contractor has the drawings, great, and they take out a wall and they're like, oh my God, this is full of plumbing, we can't remove this wall. If there's no architect, they're going to ask you, homeowner, what should we do? And you're going to be like, how do I know? So the architect said, the contractor calls the architect and says, I just found a wall for plumbing, what are we going to do? Me and the contractor get together, come up with 3 solutions and present them to the owner and say, hey owner, we found a problem. Here are the 3 ways we can fix it and the cost implications and the timeline implications. Which one of these do you want to do? So that is a big, and then also the contractor sends the invoices to the architect, not the owner.
I don't get it.
I then look at the invoice and I approve it. And I say, yes, this owner can pay $50,000.
Is that normal? Or is that just your practice works?
Yep, that's normal. So what that is, because the owner may not know about, so the invoice comes in and it says, we're 50% complete with framing. We're billing you for 50% of the framing being done. So the contractor will always be trying to get out in front of you billing wise. The architect is always like, hey, no, we don't want them to get out ahead of you. So they are your advocate on site. So we're not QA, QC. We're not going around and measuring everything and saying this is an inch off, but we are conducting weekly meetings, owner, architect, contractor meetings. We're keeping track of a lot of stuff. We do field reports. We're corralling all of the various inspections that have to happen on the engineering side. We're solving problems as they come up. There's a ton of work to be done. And obviously that is calibrated to the size and complexity of the job. So if it's a shed in the backyard, maybe not, but a big, huge project is a ton of work.
Marilyn, I can tell how smart somebody is by how dumb I feel once they've explained something. Because you explain it in such a way that makes me feel like, oh, that makes total sense. How did I not know that? Right? Not because you're using like all this fancy jargon that I'm like, oh, I'll never be able to pick up on all of those things. But you like explain it in such a simple way that at the end of it, I'm like, yeah, that makes total sense. And gosh, I'm a moron for not ever having put that together. So thank you. Cause that was an amazing explanation of the way that the architect and the general contractor work together. And it actually sounds, I'm bringing it back to medicine, but it's like, you're the patient. You might have a primary care physician, but then you go see a specialist, or you might see a surgeon, and like they work together, but they're not necessarily project managing, you being the project in this case. So I think that's a really cool way that you explained it. Is there a rule of thumb to say, okay, if you're going to do a kitchen remodel, or if you're going to do a commercial building from scratch, the project costs $100,000. Generally speaking, the architect will get X percentage of the project. The general contractor will get X percentage, and the raw materials will get X percentage. Is there a rule of thumb, or is it different on every project?
There are rules of thumb, but they are based on project type. So $100,000 actually doesn't matter as much as what the project type is. So if it's a kitchen remodel, that all those percentages are different. If it's a shed in the backyard, all those percentages are different. If it's an industrial building, all those percentages are different. So basically, the rule of thumb of the rule of thumbs is the percentages are lower, so you pay less fees when the buildings are less complex. So the least complex kind of buildings are industrial buildings and warehouses and stuff like that. The most complex things are residential renovations.
Are they complex because the owners are a pain in the ass, or are they complex because just like there's a lot going through the house?
Both.
Okay.
Both. And then there's just so much that you can't plan ahead. In an industrial building, so an architect's fees for an industrial building might be 1% to 3% of the cost of construction. Whereas on a custom high-end residential, it's 15 to 25% of the cost of construction. Yep. And I'm telling you, you have to work your fanny off to be profitable, even when pulling in those fees, because it is so much work.
You said 15 to 20%?
25 is what the big guys, really famous ones, would
say.
Sheesh. Yeah, I don't.
What sandbox do you prefer to play in?
So we do a variety of different kinds of work. So we do custom residential stuff. I just know it really well, and I know how to handle those types of clients and projects. For those, we're 16 to 18% is our sweet spot, but we do full interior design for that. So our clients are getting a huge bang for the buck. So
okay. Before we get into those pieces, can you talk about, because you've mentioned this a couple of times and the questions come up in my mind and I don't want to forget it. What does liability look like? Because you're drawing these plans, they're being implemented by a general contractor. Yes, the city approves them, but I'm assuming there's fairly high liability for an architect.
Yes, also project dependent. So the most litigious building type is condos. So that, like, by far. So that if you're an architect who works on condos, your fees will be higher. So when I'm working with multifamily developers and they say, this might be a rental, it might be condos, I tell them on day one, my fee will be X% higher if this is condos.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because the liability, your exposure is so much greater. And that's pretty industry standard. I didn't make that up.
Why condos?
So depending on the state, but basically Massachusetts, for example, they have 7 years after the project is completed if there's a defect, to go back to the original team who did it. And I'm explaining things very broad brush. I'm not a lawyer, whatever. So asterisk. But let's say the condo association decides at 6.5 years that somebody has a leak. All of those condo owners can get together and sue the architect, the contractor.
Oh, okay.
So it's just a huge mess. So there's like the ambulance chaser of the condo world. So one lawyer of the condo world who goes around and figures out which condo buildings are coming up on that statute of limitation moment, and they will find something to sue. the team for. So
does it work the same with like, so in Idaho, this is something I grew up in California and then we moved to Idaho 5 years ago and I never ran into this. But HOAs here are like the standard homeowner associations. Is it the same when you design a subdivision?
no, because it's not quite. No, not quite.
No. Okay.
Usually most architects are not really involved heavily in that kind of work anyway.
Okay. So thank you very much for explaining like what an architect is, how they interplay with general contractors. Okay, guys, we're going to get back to the show in just 1 second. But first, a message from a sponsor who is me. Oh, it's me because I'm doing the show for free. Listen, I want to give you $100. All you have to do is this. Go to Apple or Spotify. Give me 5 stars. Write a review. Screenshot that review. Send it to me, nick@cofounders.com, and you will be entered to win a $100 Amazon gift card. Every 4 episodes, I am going to choose a winner at random, and I'm going to do this 5 times. $500 for 5 stars. I just made that up, and it's what I'm calling it. Please go to Apple or Spotify, leave a review, screenshot it, send it to me, nick@cofounders.com, and you'll be entered to win a $100 Amazon gift card. All right, let's get back to the show. Tell me specifically now, 30 minutes in, because I'm a moron, what does your business do in particular? Because it sounds like you do a number of things. Yes, you do the architecture, but you also do interior design. Mm-hmm. You do consulting. Mm-hmm. I'll leave it there.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically what I'm trying to do myself and with my business is bring the full force of my experience, my unique experience, 20 years in different assets of this industry to bear.
20 years?
Clients. Yeah.
Did you start when you were 12?
Very good. I mean, so yeah, I mean, so if I graduated when I was 21, I'm now 41. So there you go.
Jeez Louise.
I mean, I'm counting my years in grad school. So subtract those. And
no.
Years.
It's just a weird thing because like I'm going to be 39 next month and I still feel 12.
Yeah.
And when I talk to people, I'm like, what? There's no way I do have 20 years experience. Mm-hmm. So anyways.
Yep. It's a cool moment. However, I can pull all of that experience together and bring value to clients. So for instance, I hear all the time that people don't know what to do with their home. They're like, I'm in my home. I love it. It's a great location. I want to add on, but can I afford it? Will zoning let me? I don't know. My husband and I don't agree about what we want to do. Like, whatever, what should we do? So I have a consulting product where I actually just meet with people and strategize and say like, all right, well, let's talk about it. I can talk about the building. I can tell you about zoning code. I can talk about all this stuff and like how it all comes together and how process would work. And then 9 times out of 10, those consultations don't lead to us being the architect, which is fine. I don't care. I just want to help people learn how the process works. It's so opaque,
I mean, you talked about this way earlier, but the fact that you have a lot of experience as an estimator.
Yeah.
Right? Like you've actually done this work. You were trained in the estimation process. This isn't like theoretical for you.
Yeah.
Are you able to do that for only the states that you're licensed in? I think you said Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and Maine. Or is that something you're able to do across the country?
So I can do consulting anywhere across the country. I've actually done it internationally as well. Super fun.
What? But she's Pitbull. Mrs. Worldwide in this case.
Yeah.
So I could have called you and been like, hey, Marilyn, I got this park in Waco. It's a freaking pain in the butt. I got to work with the city. And you would help me navigate that process, right? You couldn't necessarily do the planning, but you would help me. You'd be my liaison essentially.
Yeah. Or I could just say, hey, let's get on the phone for an hour and a half. Bring me all your stuff and let's talk about it. Let's talk about the things that I would do next if it were me, given all my experience. Or here are the people that you should probably call. You need this person and this person, this person. I can't do everything to the degree of specificity that I can in the jurisdictions that I work in and know really well. If you've got a project in the greater Boston area, I can tell you what it will cost, like roughly, because I do that work all the time. But in Waco, Texas, with your park, I wouldn't necessarily be able to say, like, these are the kind of costs you could be expecting. But what I can do is, let's say, look at the estimates with you, because I know how to read an estimate, and I can say, like, why is this guy specifically leaving this out? Like, what is with that? And I can ask questions.
You're the construction Sherpa.
Yeah, there you go.
Is this a common business model?
No.
I really like this because it's a high trust relationship. Like you have to trust somebody is telling you the right information.
Mm-hmm.
And especially the way you're positioning it, obviously in Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and Maine, you can do the design work, but in these other states, it's like there's no financial incentive if I'm the homeowner for you to say like, oh no, you should do X, Y, and Z, because you're not necessarily charging, well, you might, but you're not necessarily charging project based as a percentage. Maybe I should ask that. How do you charge when you're just doing the consulting? Is it a percentage of the project?
Yeah, there's a link on my website. You book a time in Calendly, you put your credit card in, and that's it. So you're exactly right. I'm not trying to win the job.
This is my excited look.
I could tell. Yeah. I'm like, we got there in minute 34. We got there.
Dude. Oh, I've been I've been counting down the time this whole time. But once you said you were international, I was like,
that's it.
I was in. Just kidding. No, I love this because you have an audience.
Mm-hmm.
Are you just on Twitter?
I'm on Instagram, but it's really hard to build. I need to be better at video. Like, let's be honest.
You do.
I do.
You do. I have a good friend. His name is Mike Higgins. He's on Twitter as well. And he's a flipper. And I'm like, dude, get off of Twitter and go to Instagram because people love to see that crap.
They do.
Pressure washing, the before and after, whatever.
Yes.
But because you have an audience, you could easily build a network where it's like, oh, Omaha, Nebraska. Yeah, I don't know that space, but I'll continue to advise you. And here's my network of architects and contractors that work in that space, because you're able to pull from Twitter. Or you could post, be like, hey, I have a client in Denver, Colorado. Who do I know? And you probably already do this, so apologies. But I just think that's a fascinating use case to leverage your distribution of your social media.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm trying to do. So, and the other part is not just homeowners. The other part is for developers. So developers coming to me and saying, I can't get this out of my architect. How do I talk to an architect to get what I need out of it? Let's look at these plans together. I know these plans aren't quite right. And I'm like, I can find you 3 more units in here. Let's sketch it out. So like, because, I was put on this earth to do a couple things. And one of them is to draw plans really, really well.
Okay. You need to do more video, because within 30 seconds of talking to you, it's like, oh, I trust Marilyn. You're smart.
Awesome.
You're charismatic. You obviously know what you're talking about. You know what I mean? Like, and there's a genuineness where you're just trying to educate.
Yeah.
And that's like almost the anti-sale is the best type of sale, right? You're not like pitching something. You're like, hey, here's how it is. You can make your choice. So do more video, because that's going to earn trust even quicker than writing on Twitter. Tell me, what do you charge for those types of services? How does that work?
You can go on, just so that this is evergreen, you can go on my website, mwmodinger.com, which is my consulting website, and it's all right there. So You can see. The only thing that's not published is the in-person. So in my markets, I'll do in-person. So I will come to your house or your building, and I'll do an in-person. I'll do it up to 2 or 3 hours if someone wants. And we do these I send them worksheets. I've got these packets. Like, we've got all this stuff. So
let's talk about architecture in particular, but I mean, you can also liken it to the consulting piece. What does your cash conversion cycle look like? Are you collecting up front? Is it project-based or milestone-based where you hit certain things and then you get payments? How does it work?
It's milestone-based. Cash flow in architecture is notoriously crappy. So we take a small deposit, but it's just mostly to say, like, yes, you're serious about the project to some degree. But I bill monthly, and I based on the work that we did in the previous month. So I'm not getting paid for work that I did on July 1st until, if my client is super speedy, August 2nd.
Dude, I'm telling you, this is so similar to healthcare.
Yeah, I know.
Like, we're the same.
Services, yeah.
I always tell people, I'm like, we're not McDonald's. You don't just pull up and get a hamburger and pay right then. Like, we have to bill and wait and collect. And so the cash conversion cycle sucks. And so, yeah, I may get an influx of like, oh my gosh, we got all of these projects, but you're not going to get paid on them for 3 months. So what do you do? How do you hire up front? How do you make sure you're meeting payroll? How do you meet those costs? Anyways, it's hard in these services businesses to grow and scale really quickly.
It is. And then what you're growing and scaling is completely dependent upon other forces. So if the city decides to take their time reviewing things, I could have a permit in a month, or I could go through a zoning process in a month or 2, or it could be 3 years. I have zero control. And during that 3 years, I'm not billing because I'm not really I'm going to a few meetings and I'm Might be
Yeah.
doing some work here and there, but I'm not. We make money when we make drawings. Like that's when we, and if I'm going through some long process or the owner's like, I don't know, maybe we won't do the project. I need to think about it. It'll be 3 months of them thinking. And then they're like, we want to go. And I'm like, well, 3 other things just kicked off. So now I have to, like, staffing in architecture and cash flow in architecture, wicked hard.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, she moves to Boston and now she's like, it's wicked hard. I packed my time.
I had to drop it in. I say wicked and y'all. That's my Virginia and Boston coming out.
Are the majority of your employees outsourced or are they local?
So I have one full-time, and then we team up as needed to expand and contract for different projects.
Could you use international talent for this?
No. So that is a big thing in the industry, people talking about doing that in various ways. For the work that I do, it's high touch and it's very specific to the buildings that we're working in. They're residential renovations. So I need people who are in them. By the time I'm done explaining all of the things that would need to be explained about a building to someone overseas, I could have done the work 3 times myself. So drafting is in the residential renovation world, it doesn't work like that. Now, for the sort of multifamily stuff, I could see where potentially that could be possible. Most people I know who've done it have not had great experiences. It's really hard. They have to understand American construction, and not just American construction, but regional quirks in construction. So if you're drawing stuff that doesn't make sense to a Boston PZ or a Boston framer, it's going to cost you.
What's your ideal customer?
My ideal customer is someone who values design highly, someone who understands that to do things right takes expertise.
Is that going to be more residential than?
No. So what ties the types of projects I work on together? So I do the multifamily stuff. I do quirky commercial industrial stuff. What ties it together is.
Did you say quirky?
Yeah.
That's a real design class. It's like, I don't do postmodern. I do quirky industrial though.
Yeah. So but what ties it together is that they're owners of it. So they're small business owners. So I do anything that's like an owner who's deeply passionate about the thing. So that's a homeowner. That is a small business owner. So we work with like a brewery or a retail establishment, or we just work with a circus school. They teach circus performers. So you have to get in there and understand what their needs are. You have to understand them, and you have to understand like they have really tight budgets. So that kind of person in a highly regulated environment who values it and who cares about what they're up to. That's not everybody.
Okay. So you have decent sort of customer profile or ICP. How do you acquire those customers right now? How are you getting them? How are you finding them?
The vast majority of word of mouth. So at this point, after 10 years of business in Boston, we have a really good network of people who are like, I heard of you from so-and-so.
You're not doing Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Google ads.
No ads. Architects don't really advertise.
Why is that? Is there not an opportunity to advertise, or this just been the industry?
It was disallowed for a long time, according to our code of ethics.
Really?
Yep. So we weren't allowed to advertise.
You said a long time, like up until when?
Actually, I'm not really sure, but culturally, it's still very ingrained. So architects, like you might take out a page ad in Dwell magazine, but then that's a national magazine. So you're not going to get. So you might take an ad out in like Boston Home magazine or something.
Dude,
but generally, not really.
Marilyn, that makes so much sense, because I feel like 99% of the people that I talk to, when they're like, I want to build a custom house, or I want a kitchen remodel, or I want whatever, nobody knows the process. It's like, well, what do you have to do that? I don't really know. I think I'm going to talk to my general contractor. And so if architects have had this code of ethics where they don't advertise, of course, people are going to be ignorant to how the process works, because you're not even advertising how it works.
Right. So then people like me take to social media and try to explain. So that's why on social media, I don't want to just hang out with architects. In fact, I don't usually. In social media circles, I'm hanging out with developers and owners and contractors, because those are the people who need to know about what we do, not other architects.
Are you doing SEO? Are you doing any of that stuff?
No.
You know what would be really good for you? Have you ever heard of Google My Business, or it's now Google Business Profile?
No. Sounds useful.
Okay, go listen to the episode that I did with Buddy Rothmal. I don't remember what episode it was, but it was, 31.
Okay.
And that's his whole business. It allows you to access Google Maps, right? So because when people search for things, that pops up. But it's becoming more and more popular where it's the first link that pops up. People are looking at the Google Business Profile. They're looking at reviews. They're looking at hours of operation. And you can actually post information on that that's not typical information. It looks like a post. But 50% of purchase decisions are being made, or at least informed, by what people see as the reviews and the credibility of your business, right? So go listen to that episode, but I think you would benefit a lot from that. And it's not the traditional of, hey, I'm going to pay for ads or I'm going to do a bunch of social media marketing. It's literally just optimizing your profile.
Yeah.
Pictures, information, etc. So I think you would crush it at that. I am just obsessed with this idea of you like quickly building trust and a network of, I don't know, franchisees around the country who are like, and franchisees isn't even the wrong word, but just able to execute on the ground. How are you thinking about building out a network as your business grows and scales?
Well, so there's the reality of architecture practice law, which is where the conversation goes womp womp, is that a lot of the really creative ideas that you might be talking about or thinking about run up against architecture practice law pretty quickly. So things like it's hard for me to recommend architects. Like you're not supposed to do that kind of stuff, but she recommended that. So it gets a little dicey. It's one thing if it's a private conversation and I'm like, oh yeah, they're really great or whatever, but it can be difficult on that front. You also, in certain states, can't even say that you offer architectural services until you're licensed in that state. So
interesting.
I can't even say I'm an architect. I have to say I'm an architect licensed in the states of Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and Maine. And if I were to do a project in North Carolina, I would, of course, get licensed first, but I'm not soliciting work here until, so blah, 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 blah. So there's a lot of that. To get back to the fun part of your question, I do have some national network at this point, and I've talked with some of my good friends who are actually pretty well positioned around the country about how we would do that, how we would set up kind of our own referral club, basically, that would be an affiliation that isn't just a random person. So I would feel comfortable recommending them. We would set it up in a much more formal way. The thing is that like someone calling me, unless I have a really big national reach, I'm going to refer them to my friend in Birmingham, Alabama. Like
I know
it's like kind of funny. So
it'd have to be market specific, but sorry, finish that.
Well, just what I've resorted to is to say, what I'm going to do is build expertise and trust online. And that will lead to good things, right? Like that's as far as I've gotten. And and then as that leads to the consulting stuff. Because, kind of unpacking, like I'm going to set up a referral network, I'm going to set up this franchisee thing, or it's just not how the business works. What I'd like to unpack, is it not how the business works today because we just haven't cracked the nut? Or is it not how it works today because there are legit headwinds that you really can't do it? And I would love to figure that out.
Here's what I think would be cool. And you can tell me this is a terrible idea. It would be a train the trainer model.
Yeah.
So people start following you, Marilyn, to understand how you do what you do, with quarterbacking everything. You're training them, right? They're a part of your network, they're part of your community, whatever it is. You have yearly conferences or quarterly conferences where people come together and you guys all talk about best practices in your local markets of how you help either homeowners or business owners who are, building their industrial projects navigate the world of architecture and general contracting. And you sort of build out this new ethos and network of individuals who are really just there to be the advocate for the homeowner. And then you don't have to worry about being licensed in all those states. You're working through people who are similar to you that can actually be the quarterback, that understand everything from the general contracting to the estimating to the architecture to the fulfillment of it. I think that would be a really interesting take on it.
There are things that exist like that. So Entre Architect actually was founded probably about 10 years ago, Entrepreneur Architect. And that's Mark LePage. And he's like super passionate about that idea. He does have a yearly conference. He does have these mastermind groups. He does all that stuff. So there are people who are doing that kind of thing, but it's not monetized in the same way you're talking about. So I think there's an interesting kind of way.
Do you mind if we end this conversation with some rapid fire questions?
Let's do it.
All right. What do you love about this business?
I love getting to be a problem solver in physical space. I love it.
That's awesome.
Working on physical things. And then I love making beautiful spaces that people walk in and they feel the space. Like I thought of that in my head. I marshaled it. I worked with a team of amazing people. And now like people have the Christmas morning in there. Like,
That's cool. Yeah, that is a
so
very
good.
interesting thought.
It's so good. I love it.
Okay. What do you hate about it?
A lot of what we've talked about today leads into that, having to constantly explain what we do. So by the time I'm done explaining what I do and why it's important, then I have to start with my sales pitch all over again and say, and here's why Runcible is good, or here's why. Like, it's just a lot to get to the point of like, there's just a lot of explaining. So that's not super fun. And then personnel stuff, we're facing a pretty serious shortage of people in construction and architecture, and it just makes it really challenging.
That's why I think you'd crush it on video. There's such a dearth of education that if you start putting out that type of content, people will eat it up. And hopefully over time, it makes your job easier because people are going to be coming to you. They're like, oh, I watched your videos. I totally understand that part of the process. I just want to use you for X. And it's like, cool. I can cut out all the education piece and we can just get down to the business part. What industries are you the most jealous of right now?
I mean, I think this is a fairly common answer, but folks who can be a little bit more remote. So I run a business where I work in 2 cities that are not connected to each other. So Lancaster, Pennsylvania, Boston, Massachusetts. I work in both places. So I am somewhat remote, but when it comes down to it, I can't not be on the job site. Like, that's my work. I meet with my clients remotely a lot, even when we're all in Boston, because getting across town is really difficult. But I still have to, and it's very jurisdiction dependent. Like, I have to go to the meetings in the town. Like, I have to fly in and go to a zoning meeting. Like, so, that's kind of
that's a pain.
Yeah.
Last 2 questions. First one is, if you have 2 hours in your day and you don't have any personal or family responsibilities, you don't have any work responsibilities, you can do whatever you want. What are you obsessed with right now? What are you spending your time on?
Oh boy, just learning things. So I love learning about space. So there's my rocket in the background. We're on video.
It's the final frontier.
Yeah, it's true. No, we can boldly go where no one has gone before. So I love learning about the space race, partially because of all the space stuff and it's super cool, but also like the organizational stuff. Like, how did they do that? Like, how did they coordinate all these people working on a highly specified thing? So it's like applicable. I love reading about history. I spend a lot of time, I live on a farm. I spend a lot of time outside doing farm stuff. So
is there anything in this interview that you wish I would have asked or that you wanted to say that I didn't?
Oh boy. Well, I don't know anything specific other than to say that architecture is a very tough way to make money. And I can see ways to make that better. And I think a lot of it has to do with helping architects be better business people. Like, people who are creative often say that they're not good business people or they're not good at numbers. And that's just not true. Like, creativity spans all kinds of things. And like, I just wish more architects would understand like how fun business is. It's such a fun, creative endeavor. Like, you're testing things, you're trying things, you're iterating. You're like, well, that didn't work. Let's try this other thing. Like, and to be a little bit more loose and fun with it. And also deadly serious, right? Like, I'm running a business, I have payroll, like I have obligations, like I'm not goofing around, I'm not independently wealthy. But I think that sense of creativity around business is something that I wish more architects would have. And then vice versa, more business people would understand the value of a creative mind, of a builder mind, and not just make it all about spreadsheets.
I love that. What advice would you give to yourself in 2013 before you took the leap to start your own business?
To not be afraid to spend more money on the business. I was really, like, I remember when I moved into a co-working space and it was $300 a month. And I was like, this is the craziest thing I've ever done. And when I did it, it just like ramped me up in terms of productivity. And I met a bunch of people and it was great to like leave my house and get dressed and go to and things like that, like, can have outsized impact on the business. So, and I think it's a lesson I still need to learn, is to how to not be afraid to spend a little bit of money on the business in those ways, right? Like, can have a big.
I love that. Where can people find you? Where's the best place to learn more about you?
So Twitter is where I'm most active. So at MW Motinger. My website is pretty extensive. So that's runciblestudios.com. And
say it one more time.
runciblestudios.com.
Runcible Studios. Okay.
Yep. And so I have a lot of resources on there. You can learn about my newsletter, you can learn about my consulting, you can see all of our work. And that's sort of like the clearinghouse for all of our other social media and everything else.
Okay, awesome. Marilyn, this was fantastic. I can't wait to have you back on after you've built a network of people around the country. It's going to be awesome.
Good. Thanks.
All right. That's it. Another one for the books. I'm fired up. I don't know what else to say. I hope you found something valuable in that conversation. I hope you learned something. I hope there's something that you can apply to your business today, tomorrow, in the future that makes you money, makes you more successful, gives you more time with your kids. If there was something, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Give me some feedback. And if you like actionable advice and you want more of this, I write a weekly newsletter that gives insights, tips, and tricks into the world of entrepreneurship. Subscribe in my bio. And if I can help you in any way in your entrepreneurial journey, don't hesitate to reach out to me, nick@cofounders.com. Sorry, Kelly, for more emails. And the last thing is, remember, curiosity is a superpower, and you can use it to your advantage. As my mom used to say, there's no such thing as a dumb question, only dumb people. We'll see you next time.